Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm starting this video with a quick look at a couple of pieces in my collection. Back in 2009, Gentle Giant released 4 of these Commando clone figures. I'm not sure if I can remember all the names. I know the orange guy was Boss. Oh, I'm not sure about that one. And then we had Scorch and Fixer, I think was that one. Now these guys were really good. They're nice, decent size. They're 1/6 scale, but they're actually big and chunky and heavy, just by virtue of the fact of the armor pieces on them. And yeah, for the time they were pretty good. The paint apps were okay, you know. They were difficult to get hold of. This was back in the day when Gentle Giant used to love doing exclusives, and they did some crazy thing around the world where each one of these was only available in a different country at a different convention. I think it was France. That was the British one. I think that was the American and Japanese. And yeah, at the time they were difficult. I managed to actually, over time and sort of being patient, I managed to get a set together, and I only paid the retail price for each of them, and I think they were about £60 each at the time. But what I've always wanted is a full-size statue. When I say full size, I mean 1/6 scale, same as these guys, but actually, you know, with a pair of legs on them. So let's see what we can do about that. So here we go then, this is what we came up with. I bought this from the Galactic Armory. They had, I think, 3 different designs available. I went for this one. And as I say, I printed it out in the full size scale that they done, which is roughly 1/6 scale. He's just held together, obviously, with elastic bands at the moment. Now, if I bring in one of those mini busts I just showed you and kind of get them kind of side by side for comparison, you can see pretty much that they're pretty much in the same scale. So I think that should work. I'll just spin him around a bit carefully because, as I say, he's not actually glued in any way. So I have compared the details of this to my mini busts, and you know, it's very accurate. And what I would actually say is the level of detail on the 3D print file is much finer than what you have on these busts. I mean, I guess it's the difference in the production values, in the sense that when the way that these are produced, they lose a bit of that definition and detail compared to what you can get with a 3D resin printer. So if I take off his head, I'll just try and kind of show you what I mean by that. So you can kind of see the definition and the detail and all the scarring and the marking and everything. It's just kind of lost on a production piece. Yeah, it's just the definition isn't quite there with the Gentle Giant pieces, which is again another bonus of being able to print your own things. So what I have done at the moment, just pop his head back on, I have obviously printed out the pieces, cleaned it all up. I have glued the torso, so this was 2 parts. I've glued that together. All other parts haven't been glued yet. I've primed it, so I've sprayed it this off grey colour. But what I have done is finished the base already. So the base was a simple base like this. I have another one here. So it was just a flat base with obviously the pegs for the feet. So what I did, very simple, I covered it over with sand and grit. I then spray painted the entire thing 2 coats of black. I then covered the whole thing over with a satin clear coat to give it that nice reflective look. And I then went over the rubble and dry brushed it with a couple of different reds and a touch of orange, just to try and give it that kind of otherworldly sort of Martian base. And I think I'm going to call that done. So that was nice and quick and simple, and now I can just concentrate on the model. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, as I say, I've left the arms, the legs, the backpack, all as separate parts to make it easier for the glue in. I've checked like the gaps and everything, and I think I can fully paint those parts, then glue them, and there shouldn't be any problems at all, because the cuts in the models are done really well. Galactic Armory do such a good job when they cut their models. They really, really do sort of consider the model and how they're going to paint and build these things. So I think I'm going to start with, as I always tend to start on models, I tend to start with darker colours and go light. Also, I tend to work from the deepest recesses up. So I will start with the kind of the black bodysuit underneath the armour joints, and take it from there. So here are the pieces all broken down, ready for painting. And as you should know by now, I don't do anything with an airbrush. I don't have an airbrush. I just like to paint by hand, really. So, simple case of slapping on some black. And after all that black is applied, it's now a case of going over that with a dry brush of grey. So there's the grey that's picked out all the sort of folds. While I had the grey out, I also went around the collar in just a sort of dark grey. So now it's a case of going over all of the armour in white. This is probably going to take a couple of coats, and there's a lot to get through. And that's the pieces all covered with white. It took a couple of coats to get a decent coverage, and it took a little while to do, but we got there in the end. So the next thing I want to tackle is on the helmet. What I want to try and do is recreate that visor effect. So what I'm going to do is try and use the closest colours I can get to try and blend in, as we've done there. So obviously the white into the light blue into the dark blue, and I'm not very good at blending. I don't tend to do it that often, but what I'm going to do is start with the darker colour at the bottom and then work my way up, and we'll see how we get on. So after laying down those colours and sort of blending them as best as I can, that's the result I'm ended with. It's not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think really it's passable. I think if I had to do a whole squad of them, I would struggle to sort of get it to look the same on each one. But yeah, just doing the one-off is fairly simple, straightforward. So with that done, he's starting to look almost finished. Now, I've got a long way to go because I've still got to do a lot of weathering and I want to do detailing on paintwork. But yeah, I mean, you could almost call it done here. So next thing I'm going to do is start working on the gun. I'm going to do a dry brush of grey all over the piece, and then a more selective dry brush of silver on the edges. And I'm also going to pick out any details that I want to sort of colour. There's a metal buckle just there. If I can get in focus. So I'll pick out those details and we'll take it from there. And with the dry brushing done, that's the gun finished. You can see it makes a big difference, really picks out the details. Okay, what I'm going to do next is paint on some of the pattern for the armour. So I've decided I'm going to do this guy as a character called Gregor from the Clone Wars series. So he has sort of yellow accents in various places across the armour. A little bit, you know, colouring wise like the clone troopers have, but I'm going to have to look up reference pictures online just to try and get the detailing correct. I've gone with Moon Yellow by Vallejo. Now this is quite a bright paint, but I'm conscious that once I start to weather it in a little bit later down the line, it will probably, well, not probably, it'll definitely darken down this yellow to a more realistic colour hue. So to go bright now is the better approach. And that's the colour markings on the armour all finished. I followed reference pictures as close as I could get, so I think it's fairly accurate to what we see on the screen. Obviously the armour that I have here is slightly more detailed than obviously what we see in the Clone Wars cartoon. And if you're using a cartoon as a basis, or CGI, however you want to call it, you're always going to have that issue where the detailing on something that's sculpted more realistically isn't going to quite tie up. So you're going to have to make a few artistic choices, which I had to do around the arms, for example, and the shoulders. But for the main part, I've managed to follow how the pattern goes. So the only other thing I've done is a little bit of panel lining on the armour. You can see around there, around the back pieces, and a little bit on some of the details on the backpack. So just to pick out those sort of main areas of interest really. Now, what I'm going to do next is actually I'm going to glue the model together now. So I'm going to do a full assembly, put them all together. Then I'm going to spray him with a clear coat of satin varnish. Now that'll lock in all the paint, because what's going to come next is the weathering, and I don't want to remove any of this paint, particularly as it's white and yellow. Very light colours, very easy colours to start removing if you're starting to cover it over in washes and whatnot. Okay, and the only other detail I changed as well is I just did like a power part on the knife there, which kind of matches the visor a little bit. Okay, well, let's put this guy together. And here he is, all glued together and sprayed over with a clear coat. I actually changed my mind and went with a matte finish rather than a satin. Originally I thought if I do a satin finish the armour will look a bit more metallic, but I'm going to cover over the entire thing with washes and whatnot to weather it down, so it would turn matte anyway, so I decided matte is the way to go. So to start on the weathering side, what I'm going to do, I'm taking some brown wash, in this case it's Agrex Earthshade, and I'm just going to cover over the entire parts of the armour. And then as you'll see, all the scratches start to come through and whatnot. And there's a case of just sort of kind of leaving it there for a couple of seconds and then just sort of getting a little bit of a sponge and then just sort of sponging it off. And you get a much more sort of mottled look to the end. It's a little bit wasteful because the amount of sort of wash you're putting on and taking off, but it is very effective. And after all that sponge of the brown wash, this is what you're left with. Now, in places it's a little heavy, which is absolutely fine, because what we're going to come back now with is a sponge with just water on it. Now this is why I had to coat it in the matte primer, just to make sure to lock in obviously that paint, because what we're going to come in and do now is let's see, where is it? A bit heavy. Let's go here. So yeah, so again with the same sponge that I was using before, just with a bit of water on it, and just literally keep going at it as if you're cleaning it, and that will take off some of the paint and leave a more sort of mottled and slightly more realistic look. Sorry, trying to focus in there. So yeah, so you can see here it sort of had an effect where it looks a lot more realistic than just kind of a heavy wash. So yeah, so I'm just going to go over the model and do that, and take off some of that, and obviously let some of that original white shine through a bit more. So after that kind of water wash to clean it up a little bit, that's what I'm left with. Next trick, I'm going to take a little bit of sponge with some of that original sort of white paint on it, and I'm just going to start going around the model in areas that I want to tidy up a bit more. So the backpack here, for example, and just start working it on, concentrating generally more around the edges. And again, it's just a case of working it in as much or as little as you want until you're happy with the effect. And now what I'm going to do is go over some of the yellow armour, again focusing kind of really more on the edges, and just put a slight bit of white paint again, sort of to give the effect that the paint has kind of chipped, a bit more battle damage, and you can see the sort of the white coming through. And that's all the chipping done across the yellow armour. So I think it's looking pretty good now. I think I'm probably gonna leave it there for the majority of the weathering now. I think I've got it to the level that I'm happy with. So a couple of last things I'm going to do now. I'm going to go over the visor with a gloss clear coat and over the energy of knife as well. And then I'm going to finish up the base. So as I showed earlier, I've pretty much finished all the base from a painting point of view, but I just wanted to finish off the bottom of it because it doesn't look the greatest in the world, because obviously you have to put in these holes to sort of hollow it out a little bit. So all I've done, I've just sprayed around the edges black, and then I've taken a piece of felt board. It's sticky back board. You can buy this stuff fairly easily, fairly cheaply. Obviously drew around it, cut a circle of the board, and it's just a case of now sticking that to the bottom, and that will finish it off and make it look a lot more professional. And here it is, all finished up. Now another added benefit with putting these sort of felt pads on the bottom is they're a couple of millimeters thick, and what that does is it makes the base much more stable, because I found when I printed these bases that it's very difficult to print something this size and have it completely flat on the bottom. It tends to warp a little bit, so the base can tend to rock. But if you put these padding on the bottom, you avoid all that. It's stable then. And finally, let's get him into place. He should just slot in. And here we have, and he's all finished. I'll just spin him around. And he's pretty stable on that base, so I don't think I'm going to glue him in, just in case I need to transport him at some point in the future. So I've just got him under some better lighting so you can see the final product. And yeah, I'm quite happy with this one. Galactic Armory, they do a fantastic job with not only the sculpting, but where they put the cuts, which makes it so much easier for painters and modelers. They really know what they're doing from that point of view. So you can paint, as I did, you can paint it in sections to make it much easier, and then assemble it at the end, and you don't get any gaps. The cuts are so well ingrained, you know, they into the recesses of the models, that you just don't see the gaps. So that's really helpful. As I say, sculpt-wise, really good, really detailed, very accurate. As I say, it actually is a much better sculpt than the Gentle Giant ones that came out a little while ago. Obviously with 3D printing, they're able to achieve a higher degree of detail than you would otherwise get with sort of traditional making. As I say, with the base, I obviously converted this myself, but it's dead easy to do. And what I like about these bases is actually the rim around here is slightly raised up, so you can do a textured base and still have this nice neat rim going around, which, you know, really I think makes it look like a pretty decent professional job. I might have gone a little bit too heavy on the weathering in parts, more towards the top here, I think. So I might refine that, or I might not. I just sees. But I think for the time being, it's pretty much done. And again, things with these bigger scale models, it's more of the effects they look from a distance. So yeah, I think it's pretty it's met that sort of requirement. Sometimes you have to go a bit sort of over the top to see it from a distance, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of this kind of detailing I've done on the yellow parts of the armour. Truth be saying, you can't actually see that if you step any sort of distance away. But I know it's there, so that's the main thing. But yeah, if from a painting point of view, it's a pretty simple paint job. I probably complicated matters a little bit more by going with this particular paint scheme with choosing Gregor as the character to go with. But even saying that, as long as you've got a fairly steady hand, I think the trickiest thing probably was to do a couple of these lines going around the van braces. But otherwise, and sort of around the helmet, but just take your time, steady hand. You can't go too far wrong, really. But I mean, if you just went with just a traditional, just did it in white, it would look absolutely fine. So yeah, I absolutely recommend this model. I absolutely recommend getting into 3D printing if you haven't done so already. If you have any sort of interest in collecting statues, you can get stuff like this, which frankly you cannot get. As I say, those Gentle Giant statues, mini busts, are the only things you can get pre-made. So yeah, go out there and take a bit of time, learn how to do it, and I think you get some nice results at the end of it. And finally, this is how I'm going to display him. I just wanted to show that off, and I think he looks really good surrounded by these other guys. I think it fits in really well. I bought a couple of acrylic risers just to sort of show them off a little easier. And yeah, I mean, again, I've sort of said this before in previous videos, but the beauty of this 3D printing is that you can add to your collection that you've already got. As I said before, they've never made a full statue of these Republic Commandos, so I think for me this really sort of completes the collection now. And I think as a set, for me now it's complete. I think I felt it was always missing something when I just had those mini busts. The other thing as well to think about, of course, is pricing. I don't think they're ever going to make a full statue of this character, because these mini busts are actually really heavy. They're such chunky guys with the backpacks and the extra armor and everything on them that I think it'd be cost prohibitive to try and make one nowadays. When they came out, they were expensive compared to other mini busts. They were around £60 mark, I believe, which I think at the time most of them were going for like £40–45, and again it reflected the extra work put in, plus the extra work put in with all the deco and everything. So yeah, as I say, the 3D printing, it gives you so much more options that you just didn't have before. So I really recommend trying it out for yourself. I really recommend purchasing this model and taking a look at the others that Galactic Armory have. And as I say, I'll put a link in the description so you can go and check out their work. Okay, well thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.